Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Decoding AQ. With me this morning, I've got Joel Monk, who's joining us from Amsterdam. He's a leadership coach, an educator, a facilitator, and an entrepreneur. And so welcome, Joel.
Thanks very much, Ross. Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, I'm excited.
So back in 2009, Joel co-founded Coaches Rising. It's a company on the cutting edge of online coach training with a community of nearly 50,000 coaches and programs that include participants from just about every continent on the planet, collaborated with some of the leading minds in the field of human development and coaching. In fact, I personally loved the Neuro Science of Change. It was a big, intense sort of 14-week program I took part in alongside over 500 other coaches last year, and it truly was excellent. So Joel's dedicated to this development of conscious, creative, and entrepreneurial leaders, and had an interesting start from studying fine art at university in Manchester over 20 years ago. I'm interested to just find out about your journey into coaching and maybe the range of different modalities you've experienced along that path to support the healing and sort of transformation of people. So share where your journey started into coaching, Joel.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, yeah, I was an artist, and I love going into my studio every day and making art. I was also a DJ in nightclubs the weekends, and I did pretty well for myself. I started playing in front of crowds of 800 to 1,000 people once a month. And so what happened was I left. What happened was basically one morning I woke up and I just burst into tears. I think I was about 23 years old, and my life had become quite hedonistic with DJing and art, and I'd kind of hurt myself and other people, and I just kind of lost touch with who I was. And so I just burst into tears one morning. And in that moment, I decided to sell all my records and go, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but go on a quest, Yeah. So I decided to go to Asia.
Midlife crisis.
Exactly. It's funny how these things work. It just burst in. And so I went to India. And I was on basically a pilgrimage, spiritual pilgrimage, trying to learn about who I was and what the meaning of life. How could my life become more meaningful? How could I connect with myself? And so, yeah, it was through that trip, encountering different people, different ideas, actually having some quite powerful experiences, quite powerful shifts. That actually were both empowering and deconstructed further my sense of who I was and what the world was about. And that was quite painful for me. So, all these experiences started to add up together and accelerate this process where I basically then got into Buddhism, got into psychology, meditation. And I met someone who talked about this thing called coaching. And I was like, that's it. Immediately I was like, this combines everything I'm passionate about. Plus, I was an artist. And then when I left university, I was doing community art projects where I would guide groups of people from, refugees to young offenders to old people through transformational journeys using art. It wasn't always that highbrow, I've got to admit, but what I realized was I was not a great artist per se, but what I was great at was connecting with people, creating a space where they could create, where they could take that next step. And so everything just started to fall together. And I started then to train in coaching. And ever since then, it's been just a core love for me, basically. And just one quick thing I'll add. I realized this recently, and this might inform part of our conversation later, as we talk about the world and adaptability. there was a thread that ran through my life and these things. What I found out was that when I was DJing in nightclubs, I was very attuned to the crowd and what wanted to emerge. When I was in my art studio, I was very attuned to the painting and what was emerging in the painting. I even remembered playing with Star Wars figures when I was a child. And instead of like, being all like fighting them against each other, I would build this scene and I would attune to what wanted to emerge. And once I'd created that scene with the Star Wars figures, then I'd be done. And so I realized that was what I loved in coaching too, that I love creating spaces for people to emerge, that I could hold this space and attune to it. And there was a kind of magic that would start to unfold there. So yeah, that's kind of in a synthesis of that whole journey. Yeah.
Thank you, Joel. It's interesting because it made me think as you were discussing this, sense that really is emerging of being very present in a moment, and it embodies our whole senses. And a good friend of mine, Joe Polish, I don't know if you've ever come across him, but he runs something called the Genius Network. And he's super passionate about recovery from addiction and changing the dialogue around addiction, and a lot of it connection through art and different ways of doing things, from treating trauma in different ways through connecting, whatever that modality might be, whether it's an artistic expression, whether it's psychedelics, whether it's breath work, but being able to be in a sense of self is really important about the space. What's the space that you can hold? And if you've got a gift to be able to unlock a space that is safe, that allows exploratory to oneself, that's a beautiful thing you can play with. So I've got no doubt we'll go and have a dance and play on that playground, a conversation in a moment. So going through that process of reimagining how you want to show up in the world, what is it that you gain energy from, and how you can deeply serve society is interesting. So from that, how did that get to then building a community in Coaches Rising and shifting from you doing the work to expanding a community doing that work? What were some of the key moments in that, John?
Yeah, I think for sure the call to move to Amsterdam, actually, a friend of mine, we both lived in the north of England. And, this is, again, this thread that kind of these things that unfold. So we both wanted to get out the north. We went to visit Brighton for a weekend. To have a friend down there. We thought, oh, that could be cool. On the way back in the car, we were both kind of silent and a bit despondent. And it's not it. I mean, Brighton's a great place, but we just felt like this isn't it. And 5 minutes later, he suggested, why don't we move to Amsterdam? And I thought, well, why would we move to Amsterdam? What's that all about? But we did know a couple of people there, and quite quickly we kind of tuned into this sense of conscious community. And so, I found myself 3 months later putting all my things in my car, driving over to Amsterdam. He'd already moved. And it was when I got to Amsterdam that I met my co-founder of the company, Laurens, in a coaching workshop. And again, we just connected around this love of coaching. And then this, I remember there was a program that we found online. It was like start your own online business. We were quite young and naive at that point, but full of idealism. And we just immediately felt like, let's do that, and this was back in 2009. And so we did that, and we followed our idealism when we had no clue about running a business, and we had to learn that on the go. But I think that's important. I think that we talk about adaptability. I think this sense of meaning and passion, you said to me, you're vegan and you grow your own food, and that's amazing. I think that is a sensibility that will allow you to adapt. It will give you some sense of meaning and knowledge that is going to be important in the coming years. I think we're going to experience perhaps quite big shifts and even sense of loss and grief. So we need these things that, like growing your own vegetables. But yeah, following that sense of passion is just incredibly important, so yeah.
It is. And I think you touched on a few bits I'd like to dig a little bit more on this, the impact of our environment, of who we choose to spend time with. If we are what we eat, well, we are also who we hang out with. And what do we feed ourselves intellectually, spiritually, and the environment, the difference between people and how society is in the north of England versus Amsterdam versus South America or any other location has a frequency, it has an energy, and it has a style in which people interact that needs to be in alignment with your own frequency of time. And it's something that we really focused heavily on when we were building out our model of adaptability, because a lot of previous things have been focused about competencies or skills or personalities, but what about the environment? You might have a whole range of different skills, a whole different types of character, but does the environment hinder or foster the expression and ability to enhance them, hone them, unlock them? And in a same sense, I wanted to unpick the environment of self has often been hedonistic, been about thinking, been about conceptual, been about deep reflective work. And you've shared before your beliefs that you can't really coach without involving the body as well as the mind. And so can you share, how did you come to that sort of insight? And what do you mean by sort of this full embodiment and semantic intelligence and those kind of things, Joel? What was your thought of, no, you can't do just head work and just chat stuff. You've got to feel it. You've got to embody it in the body.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. And just to say, I'm so pleased to hear you include the environment, because I think that's been a mistake we've made, just to focus purely on competencies, purely on the individual. We live in the West in a kind of paradigm of like the hyper individual. And I think that's also led to an increased sense of isolation, loss of meaning, competitiveness, all these things, which I think we're bumping up into the limits of those things. And so, to actually recognize that my environment, and this connects to your question to me, and I'll pivot that, my environment is incredibly important. It is a part of me, actually, in a fundamental sense, and I'm in deep relationship with that environment. And it's, for example, if I try to create some kind of change and I don't recognize my environment, and my environment isn't supportive of that, then I'm going to really struggle a little bit. So, hey, my cleaner's outside. It's not, you can't hear that, can you? You might have to edit this part out. All right.
No, we're all good.
She's vacuum cleaning. All right. So your question about the body, I think, gets to something very fundamental. And we're talking about that topic already. Who are we really, and what has been a dominant paradigm that we've been living inside of, particularly now I'm thinking of Europe and America. And it, you said it yourself, like we kind of we've emphasized the individual. We've had a kind of mechanical notion of like the living, and emphasize rational thought and logic. And those are like rational thought and logic. I don't want to denigrate that. It's some people
part of the system, not the system.
Exactly. Some people reject it, and say it's all about feeling, it's all about the body. But of course, we need good logic and thinking, but it's out of balance. And we tend to think that I am a person and I have a body, and that's part of this kind of this paradigm of separation. But actually, we are our bodies. This mind, even the way we kind of these subtle ways we talk about like mind body integration. Even that phrase still kind of gives a sense of like the mind and the body are separate. But actually, I feel like they're all part of a coherent, living, dynamic organism. And so, yes, our bodies basically are deeply intelligent and have an innate evolutionary intelligence inside of them. For millions of years, we evolved as these unified, body mind organisms. And we didn't. When we grow, we don't think about how to learn to walk. as a child, like we just do that, and even when we look back, we're like, you can't work out how you learned to walk. I mean, of course we can't remember it properly, but so my point is that there's a deep intelligence in the body, and if we are only talking, we're only accessing a thin slice of this transformational potential. So much of our conditioning, the way we were shaped, the way we would store our responses to growing up, the ways we were perhaps misattuned to by our family, the impact of being in certain societies and schools where, we experienced pain and we adapted to that, so that gets stored in the shaping of our body and our emotions. And so if we don't start to include that in any kind of change process, we're going to be fighting, we're going to be trying to paddle up a powerful river. It's difficult. So actually we want to begin to, through awareness, include more of the body, include more of, in this particular challenge, this leadership challenge, or I'm leading a team, or, like I keep encountering a challenge, what's happening in my body in those moments, and we can begin to surface without judgment, the shaping in our body, the tension that might be there, the emotions that might be there. And then the key is to begin to bring a loving compassion to that, if possible, recognize the intelligence in that. And as we do that, it can begin to kind of integrate, to change, and there's an energy is freed up. So we just have to include the body, in my mind.
And I think it's interesting because, like with all things, we get both the beauty of innovation from naivety, and we seek to expand our knowledge. Well, a lot of this knowledge exists. We're just actually allowing it to expand our awareness of that intelligence and that knowledge. But it can be, I think, quite scary for individuals, particularly in the workplace, if we're leaders and we have been framed historically around the productivity. We brought around things of, we need to be efficient, we need to be productive, we need to be lean, all of these things that were a sense of management. And now when we're starting to say, hey, we've got to allow space and channels for these complex things like emotions and embodied sense of dealing with deep traumas that might have come from childhood, and all of these things that, wow, whose responsibility is that? Is that the individual? Is that the team? Is that the leader? Is a development plan, so Joel, you need this new skill, you need to learn how AI is going to shift this, or you need to learn scripting to, I need to learn how to listen to my body. And suddenly I've got somebody with tears in a session, in a work session. I'm not equipped to cope with that, or I'll keep it in the box. And I think there's this beautiful, depending on your own environment, where you see great work being done, where some teams are embracing psychedelics, all sorts of ways of how do we live? How do we provide value, to others where, no, don't want to go anywhere near that. Now let's just come back to PowerPoint and stick with the numbers on the spreadsheet. And that in itself provides beautiful adaptation requirements, doesn't it? Of how do we play in those different worlds? And I'm really interested because I personally went on a psychedelic experience for the first time last year. And so it's very fresh for me. And I know you've talked about this, and it's becoming more and more brought in, shall we say, into places where it might never have come to, conversations in meetings at a workplace that has those sorts of things. And I'm curious as to, with your community of coaches, where you've, spoken to hundreds of coaches, thousands of coaches, that this balance of presence being a key ingredient, but then also how do we help people become more present or become more aware? And psychedelics, I think, can have a role in that. So I'm fascinated by your thoughts on that, Joel.
Well, Firstly, I mean, it's a beautiful reflection, Ross. And I think it's important that we are sensitive. We don't come in with a simplistic and zealous attitude, that like it's because we can learn a model and an approach and
read this book, done this course,
yeah,
in we go.
And then it's all about that, and we kind of impose that on people. And so, we need a certain amount of fluidity, an appropriate, skillful means to know what kind of approach might be needed when, so, a few years ago, I might have said, yeah, presence is everything. And I still think it is, but, I'm more like sensitive to people now. For example, if I'm sat with somebody and I'm just inviting them into their present moment experience more and more in relationship to me, and they're not used to that, and then they start to fit, it starts to over amp their system, and then suddenly they're feeling maybe some charge, maybe it even activates some trauma. That's not skillful means on my part. That's me kind of doing my thing on them, so I think it behooves us to become sensitive and attuned, and to kind of post-systemic, to know what paradigm might be appropriate when. And that for me, it's compassionate, like you described. Yeah. So we'll get into psychedelics, but yeah, particularly if we've been exploring this a lot, we have to be compassionate.
Situational awareness.
Yeah. Not so yeah, it is complex, like you name, somebody starts crying, and yeah, we're not used to that. I think it's inevitable that we have to start, increasing our capacity as leaders and in teams to embrace that kind of thing, because it's happening. Yeah. So you have to get with it in a sense, but yeah, to be compassionate with people. And the psychedelics one is interesting. It's such a powerful, I've experimented with psychedelics myself, and it's so powerful, and we have to respect it because of that, and so because of its potency, I myself went through, and it wasn't the result of psychedelics, but quite an intense spiritual crisis / burnout a couple of years ago, which I think was precipitated by a combination of, the pandemic, the increased complexity in my life, plus a load of potent transformative practices that I was doing.
Yeah.
And that humbled me. And yeah.
And I think, to give you context and some of the listeners context, I've never smoked. I've been teetotal for 25 years. Don't like wine, never had beer. It's not my thing to go and traditionally, you wouldn't put me in the box of someone who might experiment in those things. And so what were the environmental conditions? What was the situation that gave myself permission to feel that was okay? And what we're talking about is, what's the tolerance, in a culture of a company, the tolerance of, no, we don't do that sort of thing, whatever that sort of thing might be. We don't cry, or we don't turn up late, whatever they might be, is that we're stretching those boundaries. And in the same way that we, through our lives, as long as we are gifted with life, get to play with those boundaries. When we're really young, it's all about boundaries and pushing them where they are, from what's accepted with parents to the society, to then at various points in our lives, we realize, well, which boundaries am I comfortable with? Which ones do I want to play with? And mine was sparked by my father, who was going through cancer, stage 4 lung cancer. We watched together Fantastic Fungi on Netflix and got into this idea of mushrooms. It really connected with my father, and it was an experience that we decided to go and do together, because my co-founder had already been doing a lot of plant ceremonies, a lot of deep work for him, and that gave me an avenue into a world an area that was different. And so I think when it comes to adapting and coaching, whether it's psychedelics or it's, let's say, hey, I'm adapting, I see things happening over here that is different to what I've been used to. I see technology changing in certain ways. I see people behaving in different ways. Do I tolerate that or do I not? If I want to engage with them, do I, put up some boundaries and say not here, or do I say, oh, I want to explore. I want to understand. I want to seek and be curious around that. And I think what management was for maybe a number of decades, I think coaching is going to be for the next few decades to help us in this level of accelerated change of complexity that we're going through. And the other part that you've talked about is that shift from developing individual and an individual basis to working within systems, society, families, and companies. And I'm interested, what is Coaches Rising seeing and doing around that trend? Because I think that's something that many organizations are benefiting from and could benefit from if they aren't already.
That's a great question. Do you mind if I just respond to something you said? Because
I think
you said something really important in my mind there, which is like, if we look at these almost like meta competencies, the idea of developing competencies has been challenged a lot recently. People like Dave Snowden. But like that kind of dynamic between, are we crystallizing, hardening, reifying, or are we opening and curious, is an important polarity perhaps. And it might be easy to say like it's bad to kind of harden, maybe we look at some people who as they get older, they get more entrenched in their views, and maybe they would benefit from exploring and opening, and psychedelics is amazing for that plasticity. But yeah, there is something about recognizing that polarity, knowing that, yes, sometimes we need to how would I put it? Like there's a certain stability and certainty that we need, but at other times we need to go into the other side where we're purposely considering the beliefs we hold, these deep ideas and our boundaries, and that brings in transformation, and if you have too much of that, it's destabilizing. And I think that's a key dynamic. I name that polarity because I think, it's going to be so important, because collectively we're going through that on a collective scale right now. Things are changing fast.
A couple of quick points on that. Let's just explore this rabbit hole a second of, exploring things that are counter to our current belief, pushing those boundaries in whatever experience that may be. Traditionally, that's been, I do that when I feel safe. If we can get in a safe place, we can go and be playful. We can go and experiment. But I think the reality is we need to do that when we are life-threatened. In my book, I talk about, in Kung Fu, the ultimate of the Monkey King, even in the face of death at the ultimate bit, can you have a giggle? Can you be in playful mode? And society, where we're in this rabbit in the headlights, burning platform, under stress, under pressure, disconnect, great, insert whatever we want of names, can be smiling. Can we still face that with joy? Or do we need to, no, let's make it safe, let's get a cocoon, and then we'll go and play in there. And so I think this is just a fascinating subject and topic of how can we play in all areas of life and be curious in all areas of life and see all things with new eyes each day, even if it is the same stuff,
Well, this is why, and we can get back to your systemic question, but this is why it's so important to kind of expand our bandwidth. Yeah, if we're only located in our thinking mind, which can tend to be, it analyzes the situation. It can also feed into that part of our ego, which is, again, I'm not against the ego, is a really important function, helps us kind of function in the world, mediate through the world. So it's good. But there's a certain aspect where we're checking for threat. and safety all the time, or we're kind of, you know, defending, and that, you know, can be connected to our thinking mind. And so if we're only inside of that, then yeah, it's difficult to be with in a complex world, basically, where things are changing fast. Yes, ideally it would be safe, but yeah, like you said, it's not always the case, and things right now are changing fast. So that's why if we can expand our bandwidth, you know, and these certain, there's a support, you know, our bodies are a support for that. If we can access what I call post-cognitive awareness, you know, that's also a support, you know. So we're becoming more spacious, more fluid, and more resourced, and that can help us then kind of the certain situations where we can, I don't know if I would say like absorb or metabolize the intensity of the moment more skillfully than if we're just in our thinking mind. So
it's kind of the maturity of things in adaptation terms of whether that external event we're absorbing, we're coping kind of level, or that external or internal event requires a transformation, and therefore we have to release and unlock. And maybe things, you know, some of our dimensions are about unlearning. How do we measure unlearning? We might have mental flexibility to look at opposing, you know, thoughts at the same time, but are we able to then act and embrace, but either through movement or embodied action, or conscious and rational thinking action? But let's jump back to the piece around the shift and trend from seeing individual to seeing system, in terms of system of the full body, right through to teams, society, organizations, and those things, and how really what that means practically for coaches and people that are in those responsible roles for making those things joyful and efficient in what we're doing, and valuable.
I mean, I think it's huge. You know, I think it goes from the macro in the sense of, you know, this hyper individualized sense of self that we've named, and what are the consequences of that, particularly in the West. You know, that worldview. How do we live in relationship to one another, our environment, from there, right down to very practical, you know, things of being in teams and leading people. But I think, yeah, it's just so, again, limited. I'm kind of late to the party with this. You know, I was always focused on the individual, and then I was like, oh yeah, the system is essential. And, you know, I think a lot of, like, for example, leadership literature is focused on the individual, but it hasn't recognized the importance of context or the follower, you know, and that the relationship is, you know, is equally important. So if you look around the world now, that's one of the things I think that's changing, is that leaders used to have more power, you know, and now the followers, the people who are on the margins, are moving into the center. They've got just as much power, and so leaders are having to adapt to that, and that's a changing part of our systems. So, and yeah, you know, so yeah, what could I say about that? You know, in Coaches Rising, we're looking at creating a program around leadership, which includes context, includes the system, includes leading people and developing those skills. And I think that it's, again, both incredibly practical, you know, so what does it mean on a day-to-day basis? But it also gets right at the core of who have we taken ourselves to be, you know, that actually we live as a sense of a separate self, but actually, you know, spiritual teachers talk about this sense of interbeing. And I think there's a fundamental reality of that, which is kind of going to become more and more important, our interconnectedness with one another, not just as a concept and a lived experience, which is important, but also as a phenomenological experience. So I'm probably not answering your question fully, but that's what's coming up so far. Maybe we can riff a little bit.
I mean, what is an answer but an exploration, you know, and a moment in time of a level of understanding and thought that we give ourselves permission to add and take away from, you know. And I feel even if we say like Keith Ferrazzi's work around leadership and leading without authority, and we look at these different things that, we've seen it as a role and a title, to actually now, well, maybe if we think more from a nature perspective of murmurations, and actually we have leadership responsibility for every individual on themselves, and the leadership of my own journey, that I am my own leader, but I also influence others, like my environment. I am it and part of it and subject to it, and all of that beautiful, both philosophical part, but the very reality of it, of those things. And I think it's just a part of life's work, isn't it? Is to not get so consumed that we become paralyzed, that if I don't suss out by the end of this interview what the meaning of life is, well, I haven't done the work properly. To say, actually, if I can get a little bit more to add into the recipe through the exploration of good conversations, interesting conversations, then I'm happy. I'm already enough. I haven't got a lack of. I'm at peace. But I'm still curious and interested to do more. I'm not done yet, but I'm happy with where I am. And I think my coach, for example, is a chap called Dan Sullivan. You may have come across Strategic Coach and Dan Sullivan. And a lot of his collaborations recently with one of the other members at Strategic Coach in Ben Hardy, and a lot of their books, and a recent book, The Gap and the Gain, from a concept that they had a while back about measuring performance. Do we measure it against the distance to our goal, therefore we're always in no man's land, or do we measure only ever looking backwards from where we've come from? So it's always progress, and this sense of the gap and the gain. And often these very simple frameworks, these simple being analogies or concepts or things, they're so powerful because they're practical and relatable to what we can do. And as we come to sort of the final phase of our conversation, Joel, I think I just love this dance between different areas, dance between philosophy and thinking and context to, I've got to go and salt the path so that I don't slip over, and some practical stuff. It's like, my wife always loved it whenever I go off to big tech conferences or Singularity University, various things, and I come back all tech-eyed. She, take the bins out, or mow the lawn, or bring you back to Kansas. What are some of the things that really in Coaches Rising, in the business right now, where you have a beautiful position to influence millions of people around the world through those domino effects? What are the things you're working on right now to evolve coaching to unlock the best version of what that has in its opportunity? What are those focuses?
It's an incredible question. I think we talked about some of them today. I think including the system in any of the work we do. And, I just thought of Peter Hawkins, a question he brings in, to the coaching room often with the leaders he works with, which is, and what about your unborn, great grandchild? What if her voice was in this room right now? What would she say about this topic and what's needed? So powerful questions like that. So the system, I think, is just essential. And I think that this capacity for expanding our bandwidth, which is it is really crucial. The invitation, perhaps, you just talked about it. So we've had a kind of structural approach to coaching, close the gap approach to coaching. This is where I am now. This is where I want to go. And there's good things about that, but actually now there's a recognition of complexity and this move towards embracing what's here right now instead. What's here right now, and can I begin to include what's here right now? And then there's an unfolding, a more organic unfolding that can take place, a recognition of potentiality that was missed when I was just focused on that that gap that I wanted to close. And I think that honors the complexity of a, the organic complexity of what a human being is, where we've tend in the past maybe to see human beings more as being complicated through a theory, and I think, like, on a bigger view, it's like there's a deep questioning of some of the things we've inherited in our paradigm, particularly, again, there's an incredible, I don't want to criticize completely modernity and the paradigm that's emerged from Europe and America, but that has influenced the field of coaching so much, and it has within it certain deep beliefs, and some of those deep beliefs right now are being questioned. And what is the human being? Basically, what is it to be successful? What is it to collaborate? And there are views that have been on the periphery that are coming into the center from different communities, and that's both disturbing and necessary as we move through this change. So I just hope that we can create community. My desire is to create a space, a community for coaches to come together, to be in connection, to inspire one another. And I just think that community is so important. Communities of sanity, I think Margaret Wheatley calls it. As we're moving through, there is some kind of collapse taking place. So islands of sanity. So that also, I think, is something we really care about. It's a big question.
It is, isn't it? And it's a fascinating one where communities are often built around shared values, shared belief, and shared mission. And what we're asking maybe in this community is to come together on that, but explore the boundaries of those. We might, we need to have some beliefs. We need to have some values. And that becomes part of how we filter and navigate our way through the world. If I had none of them, it'd be really difficult. And so the challenge of the complex human condition is to desire both stability and instability, and be cool with that, be cool with that paradox, and know where my boundaries are today, and then tomorrow be up for reevaluating them to see if they move and shift. And how regular that may be can be down to that individual and that context. There might be some things that for my entire life, as much as I am in this physical presence, they're going to be some of my values. And at the moment, I can't see any other way than having them, that I want to do no harm, that I want to, provide love and value in the world. I can't see a version of me in a future child not holding those. But maybe, just maybe, that could shift. And that just brings smile to me to explore those things around unlearning, about the mental flexibility, and around then what kind of psychological safety we can build in a community, and that we've got each other's backs when we go off into the darkness, into something that looks strange, into something that looks different, that we don't recognize the sounds, we don't recognize the colors, the temperatures, the things of those. And that's where we need the beauty of explorers and people who then farm that kind of thing. So I don't know that it's any different really than any other time, because contextually everyone will have felt the same. I feel blessed to be alive. I love being alive right now. I love the variety that's coming into our world, and the choices that we've given, the freedom to be able to express, certainly in many parts of society, is beautiful. Where it's suppressed, let's work to try and give space and room for that. My last piece that we've got the last couple of minutes, Joel, I end each episode in and around curiosity. And it's a part homage to episode 1, which was with Diane Hamilton. She's the Curiosity Code lady, written the books, all sorts of stuff. And it's become this thread around, when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it? And people respond in a variety of ways, Joel, to that question. But I'd love you to just think about, from a curiosity sense, when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
I know immediately what it is, and then I'm like, oh, maybe there's something a bit more adventurous. So I might do 2 answers. It was just last week, ChatGTP, basically. Exploring the AI ChatGTP and the potentials for that. And I found that quite a fascinating experience, to be honest. And, AI and coaching transformation is a big topic for us right now. I forgot to mention that's going to, it has huge implications, and it's here now, and it's only going to accelerate. I'm sure you've spoken about that a lot on the podcast. But that, I'm trying to searching for another one that might be a bit more interesting. I'm going to share one that's a bit far out.
Go for it.
It's a couple of years back, but and this is, vulnerable for me to share because it is in the woo-woo side of things. Experienced Shaktipa session, which is in Hindu, kind of tradition. It's when one person, it kind of infers a kind of transmission of their awakened energy to you.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was very skeptical going in, and I like that I have a skeptical mind, and I quickly felt like, okay, there's something very tangible and real happening here. And it's not placebo. I'm pretty certain of that. This is quite potent.
Energy work of transference of energy and frequency.
Yeah.
So can you say the name again of that session?
It's called Shaktipa, and you'll find all different types of people who offer that, in places. And I can't, I can't speak to different people, but this place where I did it was potent, and had a positive impact, and kind of blew my mind actually about, again, this worldview of like, oh, everything's separate and, kind of dead and inert, but something's happening here. There is a transference of something. I'm feeling it.
This week I went and saw Avatar, the second one. This sense of all systems interconnectivity, the energy just is borrowed and transferred from different beings and different things. I think, in one of my first books, one of the chapters was, science fiction to science fact. And the, many ancient things that we've maybe lost touch with, of how we transfer and experience energies in the presence of others, of why couldn't we gift part of that to another being in some way through some form of experience and ritual. I find the response to that question in people really interesting, because maybe society's told us, oh, it has to be interesting, it has to be adventurous, it has to be all those things. So I've got to pluck something out that people will then, I'll judge myself, and others will judge me in a way of, oh, he's cool, Joel's cool.
Exactly.
And this whole journey that we're on through each other. Some it's, oh yeah, I went skydiving, I did this, I took mushrooms or whatever. To others, hey, I did the dog walk that I do every day, but I noticed something different. And there's the great quote, about it's to see things with new eyes, not that it's a new thing. And I love, again, this beauty of paradox of different things. It can be all and what it means to an individual. It's been an absolute joy. We just got started, really, in lots of the wonderful exploration of conversation around change, adaptability, coaching, and how we can serve deeply in others. Our mission is to make sure no one's left behind in the fastest period of change in history. And that's each person's version of that. And as a society, all boats will rise in a rising tide. So I just want to say a deep gratitude, Joel, to hanging out with me for the last hour. I feel blessed, and I look forward to perhaps some collaborations and explorations in the future, Joel. So thank you.
Absolutely, Ross. Yeah, I really appreciate the way you held space and our time together. So I hope this people enjoy it and it serves people. And just kudos to you, with that mission. We need that right now. So Godspeed with that.
Thank you.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.